Welcome back to the channel, guys. On this episode we are basically going to be going through my car, giving it a wash. I've never really done a external and internal interior video, so I'll touch on that and then basically carry on with fabricating. So the paint on the car is very bad because it stands a lot. I think it's now starting to fade, but it is also an old car, so we're just going to give it a basic wash because I am going to repaint the car and do a color change. We're going to use basic products, the Shield range. If you are a detailer and it makes your skin crawl, I'm sorry, but we're just going to give it a basic wash. I know it's sunny, you never should wash your car in the sun. I don't have shade, so this is how we're going to do it. This is my 2010 facelift Audi S3 8P. It has a lot of kilometers on the clock. I did buy it secondhand, so there's a lot of odds and ends that have fallen off over the time. The bumper's tired, it's, you know, been hit by so many things on the long road, and you know, it is what it is. The car's got some character, but we're going to rebuild it. So inside I have a set of bride seats. They are very old bride seats. I've had them for 10 to 12 years. They were previously fitted in the Tiburon, and then before that the guy who had them before me had them for 10 years. So they are very old, but I love them and they're real leather, so it just feels great. I do also have harnesses. I don't have a harness bar, and I know it can compress your spine and all that kind of stuff, but I would rather have seat belts than, and I didn't fabricate the stock stem from the standard seats, so I just put in a set of harnesses. Keeping to that theme, I do want to do maybe a half cage and a harness bar so that it is fitted properly, but for now that is how it is. The interior in the car is still nice. There is the odds and ends, like the cubby hole falls. It's a very common thing. Also the center console is broken, very common thing, and the sun visors, also very common thing. So my car has all the ticks. It has got an aftermarket sound system in it. It's got subs and a different radio. The radio broke the day I got it. Disappointed in that, but it is what it is. So let's go through the car, give it a wash, and yeah. This jet foam gun is such a handy little gun. Well, this jet foam attachment to just a normal hose, my Karcher pressure washer broke. So instead of going through the effort of trying to fit the right attachments or going to buy a big foam gun, or the foam attachments for the other pressure washer I have, this is like, I think 180 bucks at Builders, and then you basically just open up and there we go. Does all your foam. If you want less water, you just adjust it to more foam. Awesome little product. So in true Joburg fashion, we washed the car and it decided to pour with rain, and now the sky is turning blue. So yeah, every time I decide to wash a car, it decides to rain. So there was one thing I wanted to quickly chat about, was wheels. As you can see, this one is different to the rest. Those are the standard S3 wheels. These are my carbon fiber wheels.
Carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber, carbon fiber.
These are Ferrari reps. I love these wheels on this car, and I love how they look. More importantly, the fitment and the offset. I couldn't get a better fitting wheel. These are 19-inch with a 30 tire. I think it's 215s. And I mean, I can just fit a finger gap in there. I don't get much rubbing. So what I will do, they are curbed very bad. What I will do is send them off for refurbing when the car is fully painted and finalized. Till then, I'll run the S3 wheels. I just have a slow puncture on the one for the back. But would I love OEM wheels? Of course. Can I afford them? No chance. So if you're willing to buy me a set, I'll definitely run them. But yeah, these are staying on here for now. And the other thing I did do was I checked what exactly the type of seats I have are, and they are Bride ERGO 2s or ERGO 2s, and they are discontinued. So I do think later on they might increase in value, but they are such comfortable seats. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is just quickly degrease and clean the inside. It's a little bit harder to do now because it's rained. I like to let the degreaser sit and just what do they call it, etch or whatever it does. So we'll just hit the inside of here with some degreaser, let it sit, and rinse it off. So the next thing we're doing is obviously just degreasing and agitating the gearbox. This thing has seen better days. I'm probably also going to end up painting and sorting out the block as well as the gearbox. But for now, we obviously just want everything nice and clean. I might have a look at Cerakoting the stuff. But for now, we just get everything as best as we can with some degreaser. so some good news finally. We have gotten our flange. Really good guys out in, it was a bit far in Springs, but the laser guys, great service, quality cutting. So shout out to them. If you need any laser cutting and you're on the East Rand, I definitely recommend using them. So yeah, let's not waste any time. Let's finally build this manifold. Once you have your flange, the next step is to get the right tubing for your runners. I am using JIS 38mm nominal bore steam pipe. Cleaning and preparing your flange before welding is essential to good, clean TIG welds. Getting all the debris off of the laser cutting as well as the coating on the mild steel will ensure that your welds are strong as well as clean. Taking the time to do this beforehand will help you out in the long run. So do it step by step, checking each section you go. When building your manifold on a motor outside of the car, it is important to make sure that you bolt the flange down sufficiently, allowing it not to warp or pull when welding.
I ask you about love. Probably called me a son. But you'd never looked at a woman and been totally vulnerable. Oh my God, put an angel on earth just for you. Could rescue you from the depths of hell. And you wouldn't know what it's like to be her angel.
Alright, so what I like to do is just make as if it was in the car, and if we can get to the runners, up to the bolts between the runners, that one's good. But I mean now, if we look at this one, can we get to it to the top, from the top? We can get a spanner close, but there's no ways we're going to move that. So let's see, okay, we can get a spanner in from under here, but what's going to be in this area? So I mean this will work. We can pretty much tighten a little bit as it goes. If I use a ratchet spanner it might work, but yeah, I mean we've got to compromise. The problem is I'd prefer for this to run a little bit more curved so that it would give us room to get a ratchet in there. I might just do that, but the problem is I've got to first do these two runners here that runs to the back, and then finish up this runner here and here, because there's two bolts on the inside of here behind the collector that are just in such an awkward position. So it's just always better to make sure than just go slapping pipe together. So I am a little bit doubtful of the manifold fitting at the moment, so we're just going to quickly, I do have measurements and all of that, but sometimes we can make mistakes. So let's just check it again. So we are extremely tight to the firewall over there. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's just space. And then we're probably just gonna have to heat wrap this. And then the next problem is we have to get a down pipe. So I'm done mocking up the manifold. I've done a lot of manifolds in my time, but this one was very unpleasant. It was probably the most trickiest one I've done so far, and the reason for that is basically, so from what I've seen when I've looked online, the other VR6 turbo manifolds, you know, they do the long runner style down and the swoop up into your collector. And I wasn't really looking to do long runners because I'm not looking for that top end power. I want the car to drive. I want it to be a fun, very quick, snappy drive. I'm not trying to get to 300 kilometers an hour. That's not the goal here. This isn't a drag car or anything like that. And yeah, so because I'm not doing the extremely long runners and all that stuff, I went with sort of a shorter but more compact style. And the reason, you know, I've tried to move all the pipes and everything in a way that makes sense is the firewall sits very close, and then because we're going four-wheel drive, the transfer case is going to sit somewhere here, so there's not much room to maneuver piping and all of that. So this works, and I know I'm probably going to hate taking this manifold off. I can just tell if I ever have to. Even with me trying to design it, you know, when you work on a car and you hate the engineers who made it so hard to work on, I try to avoid that when I design the manifolds. So I'm probably going to hate this one regardless. It's just terrible to get to anything. I'm going to have to come from under here, but then there's going to be a transfer case. But we'll get there. That's the joys of working on cars. So I'm happy with it. I'll explain to you a little bit of the reasoning to the method to my madness. So we're obviously going to have the down pipe running down here. I need it to be as compact as possible, so that's why the tubing runs in a bit, and we have some space to run the down pipe out into the back of the car. And then I still need to fit the wastegate, so I haven't decided on exact location and if I'm taking it out the bonnet or if I'm just dumping to atmosphere under the car. I'll figure that out. So I've left room for either which way the wastegate might go. Then the other option, the other thing to think about was basically boost pipes. So I've left some space here, just to, I much prefer this idea of running the boost pipe around the engine this way instead of like this. On some of the big turbo 1.8Ts and TFSIs, if the turbo is faced this way, you know, the Oaks will run the pipes that way and whatever else. I don't like that. We're going to go this way and we're happy. Down pipe this side. I am a little bit concerned with the brake booster being here. We'll do heat management, but that's for a later stage. Other than that, the next thing that I need to do, and this is a tip, if you are building a manifold on a stand on the engine, keep everything bolted down, you know, your flange and whatever, and weld up as much of your tubing as possible while it's on the motor. When you weld everything, if there's, you know, with these butt welds especially, everything's going to pull and move, and with this intermediate shaft there is like no room at the back here, you know, and I don't want to clearance the block, so, you know, I just want to make sure when I weld that nothing pulls and touches afterwards. So it's a good tip, just weld everything while it's still attached rather than take it off, and, you know, you might cut one of your runners off to fully weld it, and when you weld it back on, it's moved. But if you fully welded as much as you can, it's not really going to warp or distort if you're doing only a small little gap like that. So that's the next thing. I will get cracking on fully welding this. and then we'll move on to finally running oil lines, water lines, get the turbo system finalized, do the wastegate, and I think the next thing that I might do before I start with the turbo is just give it a clean up, sandblast it, probably Cerakote it, and then do all the lines. Before moving on to the oil feed in return, as well as the water feed in return, a good freshen up on this turbo was needed. So first on the list was stripping it down. After many heat cycles on the exhaust housing side, the bolts had stiffened and gotten stuck inside, as well as the housing got stuck to the core itself. It was a tricky task, but eventually we got them all separated. Next thing on the list was sandblasting. Both the housings got put in the blasting cabinet, ready to get taken down to bare metal. While the sandblaster struggled to remove the powder coating off the compressor housing, it had no trouble removing all the rust and grime off of the exhaust housing. So we've split the turbo, threw it in the sandblaster. So I have one of those small Ardendorf sandblasters, the benchtop ones. I have done a couple of upgrades and I'm pretty impressed with how it's working. I used to hate sandblasting. It was the worst thing ever in the world to do on that thing. But this is coming out nice. There's a few things I will tweak and chuck it back in and then give it another blast. But I'm super happy with how, compared to what it looked like, how that's coming out. The compressor housing, whoever powder coated this did a really good job. So I think I'm going to have to do maybe a paint stripper and then a wire wheel. I'll just have to see how I'm going to get all this powder coating off. Other than that as well, where I needed the media blasting, well, sandblasting, it came out perfect. And then I am going to chat to Gabby at Fastech to see if he can rebuild this core. It's essentially an eBay turbo from anyone outside of South Africa, for anyone outside of South Africa. Locally we call them Mr. Turbos, cheap turbo. And I know Gabby has problems trying to rebuild these, but we'll see. If I can just service the cartridge, then I'm happy. If not, we'll run it till it blows. It's just full send. So let's do some more tweaks and then we'll carry on. While I've had my fair share of turbocharged cars, I've never had one with a T51r mod. So I thought I'd give my hand at trying one out. The existing compressor housing already had surge ports in it. For me to do the T51r mod, I'd have to machine those down. So onto the lathe it went. Those with a keen eye would have noticed that when the comp housing was on the lathe, it was no longer powder coated. After tweaking the sandblaster, it made light work of the powder coating. We then threw it in the sandblaster one last time after being on the lathe to clean up the necessary parts. I had also cut the comp housing on the outlet tube to make space for a 90-degree bend to be welded on, in order to make the routing for the boost pipe a lot easier. So we got our turbo all cleaned up. After tweaking the sandblaster, it basically made it like cheating. It just absolutely demolishes any bit of dirt, grime, powder coating, anything that was in there. So I'm super happy with that. That thing works like a monster now. The next thing I did was I started my T51r mod. Never had a turbo with one, so yeah, I've got the center machined out. So now what I'm going to start off with is the press fit insert. So I'll machine that out, press it in, and let's see how it turns out. Some people say the whistle is annoying, others say they couldn't drive another car without it. So I'm keen to see what the results are. So the next thing that I want to move on to is now finally doing the lines. Got to do the oil feed, oil return, water feed, water return. So one of the most important tools you should have in your toolbox is this thing. I use this on everything. Basically, if I need to see a length of pipe for a boost pipe and it's got a curve, I know pretty much how much I need. It is absolutely great for wiring. You don't want to just go and cut lengths of wire, especially if you're using like the military grade mil spec. That stuff's expensive. You don't just want to go cutting all crazy. You use this, measure your points, it's flexible, and you cut the exact length you need from connector to connector or sensor, whatever you need it for. And for braided hose is not cheap. You want to go cut it up, and especially if you're crimping the ends, obviously you got a little bit more freedom with like your AN fittings and all that kind of stuff. I prefer to crimp on my turbo stuff just for budget. If I could afford the AN stuff, in South Africa we have FTF, I would love that, vibrant stuff, but this is a budget. So the way I use it is you basically from point to point and then hold it. So I will obviously run some tabs to keep everything away from the heat, but it's really simple to just know your basic exact length without having to go and cut and recut and recrimp and all of that. So you can just get to where you want to go. So there we go. We know the length we need. And now I can take this to laser air brakes and they can make up the pipes for me. I'll then use P-clamps, or I might 3D print just some connectors, some couplers just to keep everything out of the way. So let me measure up the rest of the lines and then we shoot through and go get those done. Laser air brakes and hydraulics have been my go-to hydraulic shop for the last 10 years, with the same people still working there, dedicated to good quality service and good quality products. Check this ugly cake. With all the necessary parts to finish up the lines in hand, the next step was for me to do the oil return pipe. I opted to use a plate that I had laser cut in the past. I needed to put the plate in position to mock it up in order to fit the return pipe. Once the turbo was fitted, I was able to then put the fitting onto the plate and mark it for where I needed to weld it. Once I had the return line fitted to the turbo, I was then able to see exactly where it would land on the sump. I then had the task of removing the sump. So I've taken off the sump and given it a bit of a wash and taken off the windage tray. But after cleaning it, I've noticed something a little bit weird. If you look, there's a whole lot of like grinding streaks from someone going in with like a grinder, and it's also see it along there, but it's also along the outside and on the bottom. So I'm not too sure if this whole piece here has been re-welded or something. I don't know. Maybe one of you can help me solve this mystery.
The first step we needed to take in order to weld the bung to the sump was grind down an area suitable that didn't interfere with any of the bolts or anything inside the sump itself.
So we are pretty much done with the lines. The oil feed is almost complete. I need to do some P-clamps just to keep it out of the way, and then that one is done, can be checked off the list. The oil return line, it's fully mocked up. I have only tack welded the bung into the sump. The reason being is I am a bit concerned with how close the drive shaft runs to the sump. So if I need to make any changes, you know, it's not that much of a big reverse, or we might have to get tighter fittings or something like that, but that I'm happy with so far. I have also got some really good heat management for the return line, because obviously it does run a little bit close to the runner there. This stuff works magic, so that is good. But I think for this episode we are done. On the next one, I think what I'll be doing is drop the turbo off at Gabby, see what he can do for me, and then we focus mainly on the intake manifold, and then we are done with what we need to do as far as inlet and outlet of the engine, and the turbo kit then will also be done as soon as we receive it back from Gabby. I'm waiting on gas just to full weld this, so that I'll also do in the next episode, as well as wastegate placement. Then I can drop these off to get cerakoted. So I look forward to the next episode. We will also hopefully drop the clutch off. I forgot about that, and I think we are that much closer to just getting this car started. So guys, please keep tuning in. I really appreciate the support, and like, comment and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.